Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Parenting Truth and Dare podcast. Today, I'm joined with a very special guest of mine. Her name is Michelle, and she's been a colleague, a co worker, and now my manager for many years. And I think it's a pleasure and an honor to have her on board because, as you will listen through the course of this episode, she has played a variety of roles in her life, and it's almost like I'm in awe of how she's handling her life so well. So, just a brief introduction about Michelle before we delve into the podcast itself. Michelle is a devoted mother, and she's heading sales as a vice president in our organization, which is Manga High Blue Duck Education. It's based in London. She has a background in biomedical sciences, and she's passionate about this intersection of education, science, and innovation to improve students' lives. She's worked in research and development in a lot of government laboratories in publishing houses like McGraw-Hill and Pearson. And now she's been with Manga High for 12 years, which I feel itself is a huge, huge accomplishment nowadays when people switch from one job to the other to be stable and to be able to giving value to an organization for that long. It says something about the kind of work she does. She graduated with an understanding of medical sciences and has successfully challenged her knowledge into her evangelical journey in Manga High, which is a mathematics program, and she aims to enhance math learning in the modern day classrooms. So her journey from the science researcher to education and all of that transition from one role to the other, it's fueled by a commitment to really practical and impactful solutions for people around. And in her personal life, when she is not completely immersed in work, she explores new scientific technology advancements, and she's one of the biggest cheerleaders for her children. So I think this is something which we all want to learn, about from her as to how she manages to juggle all these roles. Just a background of where she's coming from. She was born in Malaysia and now living in Australia for the longest time, I think. And her parenting style is a reflection of her own personal self-discovery. Again, something that we talk a lot in the Parenting Truth and Dare podcast is about first becoming aware of your own self and finding out, what are the things that may be causing you to not really show up as a wholesome parent. So welcome, Michelle. It's truly delightful and an honor to have you.
Thank you, Ritika. Thank you so much for that amazing wrap to begin with. And I think it's, as you were going through that summary, it's, what really resonated with me the most and what actually got me quite emotional and goosebumps was actually when you said, I'm that cheerleader for my children. And I think out of all the roles that I play, that is the one that's closest to my heart. I think that's the one that I genuinely believe everything else you do is all about making sure that you can and you are in a position to continually be committed to your children in that sort of, cheerleading kind of sense. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think we'll delve straight into it. I mean, really, the big question is how do you do it, right? What kind of special diet are you on to make sure that all of this is in place? And really, how are you juggling these responsibilities? And these are big responsibilities, right? You talk to us about your kids and what they're into, and I know that they're all achievers in their own right, but also you. And your career trajectory, how that moved, how that started, in fact, and what were some apprehensions that you might have had when you became a parent. So talk us through that, because a lot of new parents are in that boat and they're not sure exactly where their life is headed.
Absolutely. I think the main thing is, as a parent, sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit. And I think that's a really important part as well, to actually recognize that you are doing good work rather than, looking at the negatives. Because the truth is, with any journey in life, there will be a lot of distractions. There will be a lot of negative people around you and negative experiences. But it really is, it's about what you want to focus on and then continuing to move that next step forward to that parent parent that you kind of visualize and envision yourself to be. And I think that's really important, that whole visualization of what kind of parent do you want to be, because quite often, as an adult, you kind of grow up to become an adult, and you fall into becoming a parent, and you fall into becoming an employee, and you fall into something. And it is very easy to get caught up in that rat race of, getting one task done after another, and then, delivering or chauffeuring your kids to one event after another, without really understanding or reflecting back and say, okay, well, how does this all fit into the bigger picture? Because you're right, because sometimes it is very, very difficult when you are waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get some work done before you drop your children off, and then at 8 o'clock you're still driving them or picking them up from one event after another. I think it is sometimes it is easy to get quite overwhelmed by perhaps even what you feel at the time, an underwhelming life. And I think it's, I hear that there is this ad in Australia, and it's an IVF ad, and it kind of makes you realize, it talks about how difficult sometimes becoming a parent is, the process, the journey of getting there. And I think sometimes when we are caught up in the busyness of the day to day, that you forget how special this whole experience is in this world. In terms of how I got here, I think I have come from, I come from a science background, but I think deep down inside me, and I was just telling my partner this recently, sometimes you find your way, you kind of fall into one place after another, and then find yourself being where you're always meant to be anyway. And for me, that was always a parent. I've always, as a child, I've always imagined myself as a parent, and I've always wanted that role in my life. And I always imagined myself, working, being a working parent as well. And I think I have my mum to thank for it as well, because my mum was, your 1950s born, your baby boomer, and, we're in Malaysia. And if you imagine, there is, in an Asian country, there is certain expectations about what the role that women play in the family unit, and the role that the dad plays in the family unit. And my mum was very early in challenging that. And she raised 5 kids, 4 of us females, all 4 of us are very strong women. And I remember her always saying, you need to make sure that you have your own identity. And that's really important as a woman, is to have your own identity. And your identity as a mother is separate to your identity as a working parent, is separate to your identity as an employee. So I think having that as my absolute backbone, I think, everywhere we go to, or the next challenge that I take up in life, whether it be personal or in my professional life, I think there is always space for you to be each one of those persona in your life. And I've been lucky, because I have always imagined that I love the work that I do, and I absolutely do. And I think it's been because of that, it's made it so much easier for me to balance the parenting and the working mother. Now, that's not to say, I am completely organized at all times, because I think it's a myth, right? It's how you manage those impromptu, oh, mum, I got to be here, and you've got other plans. And it's really about your own attitude towards all of these impromptu things as well. And I think, if we really boil it down to, it's the mindset, it's the attitude, it's when things get too busy, just keep going back to your North Star, which is why you're doing all of this, and then everything will be okay. I think there is no secret. There are plenty of calendars, there are plenty of apps around to help us manage our productivity, but I think when it boils down to it, it really is just enjoying, having a positive mindset about what it is that you want to achieve, who you want to represent to your children, who you want to represent to just your other family members as well. And I think it's really exciting to see more women take on that role of, being very career driven, but still being there for their children. And I think that's, setting ourselves up for the next generation. Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's so many valuable nuggets you gave there, especially starting from the fact that you asked what is it that you want to do, right? That visualization part, I think that's something that I talk to parents a lot about, because really, what destination is your GPS set to, right? If there is no destination, then how are you assuming that you'll get anywhere, right? So that part, the visualization bit, I think is a very powerful exercise. And if you can revisit that every now and then, because what you wanted to be maybe 5 years ago is not the same as what you want to do now. So revisiting that, I think, is also a very interesting and important activity. What I also really liked about what you said was how your mother's parenting influenced your life's journey, right? And that's exactly what I talk about, that parenting, it has a generational impact. The way you were raised, the kinds of values and basic toolkits to handle life you were given with through the parenting that you got, I think that really sets you up for success. And that's why I think we're on the same page on the fact that parenting should not be done on autopilot. You have to be more conscious and aware. And if you are doing all of that, it's possible to show up as a fulfilling or fulfilled mother and fulfilled employee and play all of those roles. That brings me to another question, which I think we hadn't really thought about this when we planned this discussion, but it brings me here, right? You said that mothers are juggling all these roles, and that's so interesting. It's possible. But there's this other voice nowadays that you will hear, that there should be absolute equality and everyone should be, or the spouses or the partners should be taking equal responsibilities. In your experience, do you feel that happens, or do you feel that should be the norm going forward? Or are we tilting, dynamics for no reason? Like, what do you think about this? And feel free to share your honest view. You don't have to be politically correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's and I think it's really interesting to asking me this question. I think you will get a very different response compared to, let's just say, someone who was born and raised in Australia, because I came to Australia when I was 15 years old. So a lot of my sort of younger impressions of where women fit into society, where women fit into a family unit, the role they play, I think that was pretty, not set in stone, but it was pretty challenged. So the idea of then coming into Australia and saying, okay, well, here's a woman who is able to, go as far as you want in your career and be supported by the networks that you have around me. And I think I'm also quite lucky, and I completely am, I'm completely appreciative of the village that I have that surrounds me to help me raise my children. And I think I'm really
tell
for
everyone
it.
about that village as well. After this, you should tell that, because that's something that I think you've consciously chosen to do, or you were blessed, but that's a very important part. So you can come to that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's really important that we don't necessarily say a woman's job is this only, or a man's job is that only, because I went through my first marriage, and we separated. That relationship ended when my youngest at the time was 5 years old. Now, I wasn't a victim of any circumstances. It was truly a conscious parting of the relationship, right? And I think it's really important that we never, as a woman especially, you never fall victim into anything. And again, I go back to that whole mindset, the attitude that you have to take things forward, because I think, and we've come out of that relationship with no blaming. And my children have a very healthy relationship with their father. And I think that's really important as well, because I remember at the time, Melissa was finishing up in her kinder years just before school started. And I was speaking to her kinder teacher at the time and said, look, just to let you know, to keep you in the loop, this is what's happening at home, the separation. And that if you notice any behavioral changes in the classroom, just be aware that this is what's happening at home. And she said to me, and I will carry that forward forever, she said to me, that's okay. Kids are resilient so long as they know one person in this world that loves them, that one person is their beacon, they will be absolutely fine. And I will carry that. And I made a commitment to myself at the time as a single mother. I said, no matter what happens, no matter how tricky things got financially, emotionally, you just have to be strong, and you still have to be. And that doesn't mean you never cry. It means that you can cry together with your children. And it means that you have that special kinship, that special relationship with your children, because you don't want to be the authority parent. You don't want to be that, instructional parent. I think I've always committed myself to be a parent where you have a good, healthy friendship with your children, so they are open with you. And but at the same time, they also know that you have a little bit more experience in your life and a little bit more wiser, and so they can come to you for advice, but not from a judgmental parenting point of view. And I think that's really important. And as far as the village is concerned, I'm very lucky. I've got, my siblings that live in a within a 5K radius of me, and being able to just drop my kids off, having parents. My mum at the time would go and pick up kids from the kinder and from primary school, and just having people around to help out absolutely is, has been an absolute blessing for me. And I think as a parent, especially when I was going through my single parenting stage, I think accepting that kind of help, it doesn't make you less of a parent. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that your children is raised not just based on your values, but your extended family's values as well. And I think it's absolutely healthy for them to be surrounded by multiple people that will always be there for them. So I absolutely think that the family unit is important, and as a working mother, never be afraid of asking for help, because it doesn't make you any less. And I think it's important that we pat ourselves on the back for the fact that you can do it all.
I think I feel like when I talk to you, we are living parallel lives in two different geographies, because I also feel that this thing about consciously choosing a tribe and making sure that you enroll them in your life and you give them the respect that they deserve, because they are your parents and they're around, but not misusing their time, but also enrolling them in the whole parenting, experience, right? Because they are also out of practice after so many years, and now the world has changed. So there'll be things that they'll do that may not sit well with you. So you have that conversation, right? That, let's raise this child like this because this is the thought process, right? So that enrolling and building a community is a very big and important thing. And especially in India nowadays, the situation is that everyone's moving towards more nuclear families. You must be aware that India was primarily a joint family setup where, let alone like outside or 5-kilometer radius, everybody was in the same house, right? So kids were getting raised with cousins and extended family and all of that. So it has had its own pros and cons, of course. And now largely because of a lot of influence of the West or people moving to bigger cities, the families are shrinking. And because of that, the access to, family members or people who genuinely care for your well-being is missing, right? But then parents are also, there is a possibility that you can enroll your neighbors or go out and make friends and, come together in a way that you are supporting each other, which a lot of parents, I think, struggle with. But that's something that it'd be helpful if they could overcome that, I find, and create a tribe of their own. And what you mentioned in terms of vulnerability with your children, right? That you show them, you cry with them, you explain to them that you're not going to be that perfect person, but you'll grow with them. I think that's also a very interesting thing that you came on that. But was there any apprehension in your mind when you decided to be that way? Like, of course, there are certain parenting models, right? There is the authoritarian model, there's the authoritative model, there are all of these other kinds of, I don't know, helicopter and dolphin and so many other kinds of parenting. So how did you choose this path? Like, what you did sounds like common sense parenting to me, but tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say that because, parenting doesn't come with a manual, right? You don't kind of go in and do an IQ test and then decide, make a decision at the end and say, okay, well, this is my parenting style. I think it's important that as a parent, you also acknowledge that you are still going through your own growth and your own self-discovery. I became a parent quite young in terms of, Australian society standard. And so at the time when I had my first son, none of my friends had children. And that was a really interesting experience too. And I felt like I was growing up, but at the same time, I was also being responsible for this child. But the thing is, what I learned about myself over the last 20 odd years of being a parent is that you don't pretend that you know it all. And sometimes you don't go into it consciously saying, this is the exact type of parent. You got to feel like it feels right to you. And even when I was going through my first relationship through to my second relationship, I'm also quite a very different parent as a 25-year-old parent compared to a 42-year-old parent. That's a very different parenting style as well. Only because you feel like hopefully you've got it more, you're more self-aware. But that said, the commonality that I do have, and when I see my three children together, I think the commonality really is in the fact that I've always just wanted to be their friends. I just wanted to be their cheerleader. However, I get there. And I think at the time, it all, especially with my first one, I was only 25 at the time, and going through a relationship that I wasn't completely happy with. But at the same time, also knowing that the only thing that felt right in my relationship at the time was my relationship with my baby, and just trust that instinct. Now, as far as, this whole idea of, are you consciously making decisions? I think the only thing you need to be conscious about is truthfulness. Your truthfulness with yourself, your genuineness with yourself. And sometimes if you say, I can't do this on my own, it's completely fine as well. But the thing is, don't ever feel as though you can't get help. And I think talk to your girlfriends, talk to your partner if you have someone that you can trust at the time. But the main thing is just, within yourself how honest this relationship with your baby is this relationship with this persona is. And I think that's really important, that honesty, that self-reflection, that just being able to say to yourself that you're doing a really good job and not punish yourself and not self-criticize too much. I think that's really important. Yeah.
So do you think, because your journey has been so interesting with all the three children, and also now that you're playing a very important and pivotal role in the organization, like you're really heading the direction in which the company is going, and for the benefit of all those who are listening or looking at this podcast, Michelle is heading a global UK-based edtech company. She's heading the sales for the entire, the world region, wherever the program is running. And it's a fairly well-established program. It's been around for 15 years, and Michelle's been part of it for, I think, most of it, the 12 plus years. So the role is definitely challenging. There is definitely a lot of accountability on your shoulders. But there's also the fact that your children are growing, and I'm sure their education needs are also growing, right? They're going to college, and they're deciding their careers. They're playing sports. They're doing so many things. So sometimes do you feel that there were different challenges when they were the diaper age and you were just starting your career? That was again a lot of push and pull. But here again, now you're at the peak of your career, or of course you'll go beyond, but you're doing so well, and then now your children also need a lot of you. So do you feel this is a never-ending thing, or does it get better?
Yeah, I think, at different stages of your children's life, there will be different levels of worries. And, I have my 18 and my 16-year-old now. Their expectations and reliance on me is, of course, very different to my 2-year-old son. Now, that said, you will always feel that push and pull. And I think that's just simply part of life. If it's too easy, you probably wouldn't want to do it anyway. You kind of want to do it at the point where you are constantly making those conscious decisions of when do you spend time with your children and when do you spend time with advancing your career and so forth. And I think, again, it goes back to the attitude. You need to have this attitude of, your children is this part of your life, and you make sure that you commit yourself to it. But of course, work has those commitments. The interesting thing is, work has a certain expectations of you. You're supposed to work X number of hours during the day, but you don't have that expectations with your children. There is no law or rules in society that says you must spend 4 hours a day with your children, but it is something that you need to commit yourself to. And I think that's a very important thing. Sometimes it is a dinner, sometimes it is just that quick chat while you're driving the kids to their events. But if you are conscious about the fact that you are checking in with your kids, and sometimes it's just as good, it's good enough for your children to know mum's busy, but at the same time, whenever they need to talk, you drop everything at the time when they need to talk, and let's just talk it out. And having that person, I think having that relationship with your children where they can trust you, they trust you enough to know that if they are feeling weak, they are happy, they are comfortable enough to come to you. I think there was one moment in my son's life that I always cherish, and he was about 15 or 16 years old at the time, so a couple of years ago. And now my son, if I paint this picture, he is, quite, he's very self-disciplined, he's very self-driven, and he rarely asks for help for anything. And in fact, from the outside looking in, he looks like he's got it all together. Emotionally, he's got it all together. He understands his own emotions. And so sometimes I feel as though I don't have a role to play for him anymore. Where do I fit into his life if he's so independent already that he can cover his schoolwork, his work life, and it looks like he has it all together. But there was one day I was just sitting on the floor and I was watching TV, and he came to me and out of the blue, and all he did was, he sat up really close next to me and gave me a hug. And he just said, I just needed a hug. And, and it was just out of the blue. And I was tearing up and I thought, that's exactly the parent that I wanted to be. The parent that he knows he can come to when he needs me. Because I don't want to be the helicopter parent that says, hey, are you okay today? Can I check on you? Have you done this? Have you done that? I felt that I came out of a relationship where my ex-husband was, he moved out of a family home straight into our home. So he had a lot of growing up that he needed to do. And I didn't want that in my children. So my son started doing his own laundry when he was 10 years old. And, even till today, he's now 18 and I haven't done a piece of his laundry for the last 8 years. And my daughter is the same. They do their own thing. And I think, I'm still their parent, but I don't need to be the person that does everything for them. And I think, to me, that's the kind of parent I want to be. In terms of the intersection between work and being a parent, sometimes I pick my kids up from school at 3:30, and then after 3:30, I would have a 4 o'clock meeting. We'll get home and I would say to them, Mum's got a meeting at 4 o'clock. And I've always loved that my children observed me working, because, and I've been lucky enough also to work from home most of the time. And I think that really helps build some kind of expectations for my children as well, that when they grow up, they are expected to work. And I always say to them, if you find a job that you love doing, you will never work a day in your life. As the old saying says. And that's what I want. That's my wish for my children, is for them to observe and watch me never whinge or complain about work, because I absolutely enjoy it. And I want them to be in that position as well, where, whether it be because of good attitude or whether they are lucky enough to find a job that they absolutely adore, I think it's a really good way of living life, feeling like you're doing exactly what you want to do, or at least being able to see where it's leading to, and it will lead to something that you want to do. So, yeah.
But that brings me to a very important question now. Now that your children are looking at building their own careers, how much of involvement did you have or do you have in their decisions? And how should parents handle that? Because a lot of parents are actually not even aware of the job titles and the job roles that are out there right now. Like, they don't understand, especially if I talk from an Indian perspective. Yeah, people understand what engineering is, what law is, what medical is. But if you tell them, I want to be a brand manager or a social media manager or whatever, I'm just saying some names out there, some titles, the parents may not understand what kind of a career that might be. Is it a stable career? Will it lead? And because you are also from the, you have an Asian background, I wanted to understand, is that something that you also feel, or has sort of, I don't know, Australia changed you a little bit in that sense?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And I think it's really important that we don't project our, let's just say, dissatisfaction towards our own work, our own employment towards your kids. Because, sometimes parents try to live their own corrected version of their own lives through their children and kind of almost be too demanding about what their kids should be doing. I think what you need to, as a parent, the only responsibility I have is build someone of good character, and having that good character and that good mindset and attitude, they can then put that towards any career. That's career agnostic, right? It doesn't matter if you become a lawyer, a traditional profession like a lawyer, or a profession that doesn't exist yet, like whatever engineer, an AI prompt engineer, something that's new. No one can educate good attitude and good character. So I think, when you are working in partnership with schooling, the schools might be guiding your students through that sort of the technical knowledge base that they acquire over the years. But I think as a parent, you're the role model for being a good character, being a good person. And I'm not talking about simply morals. I think it's about looking at when you are encountering a challenge or an obstacle in your life, how do you overcome that sort of attitude, that mindset? I think it's really important. And once you have that foundation, then it doesn't matter what they come up against or come up with. Then hopefully, fingers crossed, they will get over it and they will be able to embrace it. And I think as a parent, just be mindful that your children, ultimately your measure of success, and that's the way I see it, is my measure of success is my children being happier in their life. And whether that happiness is doing a career that you dictated or doing a career that they found themselves because they have a good attitude towards finding something that they love, I think at the end of the day, so long as they are genuinely happy, I think as a parent, that's the only thing that you'd really want for your kids. I think it's really important that sometimes we get really caught up as an adult. You get really caught up with all of the adult issues, right? Your finances, your work, and then lack of time and so forth. But remember, you can't project or project that the difficulties of your life as an adult onto your children. They still need to self-discover what their character is, and you just need to model that sort of good attitude for your kids. And
but does that mean no expectations or low expectations? What does that mean? How does a parent actually follow that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is a part of me that is still that Asian mum, right? And I think it sounds like it's, do whatever you want so long as you're happy. That's not what it's about. I think you do have expectations that you want your children to do hard things in their life and being able to get through those difficult things. For example, I was actually just meeting with my daughter's tutor, and or we were interviewing a tutor for her, and she's never had a tutor before. She's now in year 11, and she's also taken on the really difficult maths. And as I was explaining to her, getting through this difficult math is not just about you might not use this maths anymore, but I think being able to get through these difficult maths is character building. And it's that character building that's priceless. That is what you will take with you for the rest of your life. So I think it's important that we have expectations in our children to be, really productive citizens in this world, but you also need to model that with them. And because we can't necessarily define exactly what job they do, what you can define is the attitude they have towards whatever job it is that they choose to do in the end.
Yeah. Well, but this is where I want to draw your attention to another part of your life, which is you've always been around science, right? You were a biomedical student. You've been with Manghai, and you've thought about maths maybe every single day for the last 12 years, whether you've actively done it or not, but you've been involved in the math edtech space. Do you think a scientific mindset, regardless of what you choose in terms of your career, is important, and that's something that children and parents should nurture? Like I was at an event yesterday. It was the celebration of the World Quantum Day, and from morning till evening, the entire discussion was about the fact that even the best of the best professors in some of the top universities have no idea what quantum mechanics and quantum physics is all about. But that shouldn't preclude us from educating ourselves, right? We can go online, we can find resources as parents to understand at least the basics of it, because if the future of, let's say, medicine, the future of pharmaceuticals, the future of Hi,
Sorry,
sorry, I
I'm
think
back. Yep.
some internet connection. We'll edit this out. Wait, if this is, no, it's recording, I think. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I was asking about the scientific temper. Is that something that you work towards building in your children? And do you think it's important, or is this something that not everybody is up for or not needed?
I specifically if we think about how a scientific thinking looks like, is actually a list. So in fact, I was talking to one of my really close friends who is IT trained, and I said to her, I have a lot of trouble communicating with IT people, which I do, because and she said something to me which it sort of just made me click and helped me understand. As a scientist, I'm a list person. So I would say step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this, and you tick your lists off. And I think that comes from my scientific training. And you always start a new challenge or a new project with a null hypothesis, right? And I think it's the way I live life. You kind of look at something and say, what is the expectations? And then you kind of go through and experiment through things and say, what is it that you're trying to discover, and make sure that you have that sort of baseline that you're comparing yourself to. Now, with an IT person, on the other hand, it's all about flowcharts. So the thing with flowcharts, it's evolving. There is no real starting point and there is no end point, because everything is interconnected. So I think an ideal person should have a mesh of the two, being able to put your list and then realizing that step 1 on your list might be connected to step 3 of your list, but might be connected to step 6 of your list. And it doesn't have to always, things don't always have to go in chronological order. Now, in saying that, what I mean by all of this in terms of practicality and in real life, outside of that scientific training, is sometimes things don't go exactly the way you want it to go. But you also need to trust that there's got to be a reason why it got here instead of there, and having an understanding of where it connects. And again, be kind to yourself and say you started at a point and you might not have achieved the outcome that you originally aimed for, but you got somewhere else instead, and that's completely fine too. And that's the thing with raising children, is sometimes it is okay to say, actually, we agreed that we would, meet each other at 3 o'clock after the movies, but something else happened and they got caught up. And I think, a traditional parent would scold their kids about, why this happened, and how much it might have eaten up into their life, and the sacrifice, and reminding your children of the sacrifice that you've made for them and so forth. And I think that's not a healthy way of raising kids. You want your kids to feel, to really respect that you have their well-being in mind, and that they also respect you back and say, actually, I apologize for being late because this happened or that happened, which was outside of their control. And I think that's another way of building trust with your children, is it's just having that genuine support for your kids, rather than looking at your life as just being a slave to your children. It could be the same event, but it's a very different mindset over that same event.
Yeah. So you talked about mindset, and I think this is something that I also feel that this is something that we have to work on ourselves, right? Nobody else is coming and installing an appropriate mindset software in our brains, right? So we have to create.
Sorry, Ritika, you're breaking up.
No?
Still breaking up a little bit. I can't see you.
Am I audible now?
Yep, I've got you now. Yep.
All right. So what I wanted to ask you next was, what do you do to build a mindset that actually allows you to embrace all of these uncertainties, all of these challenges? What is it that you do?
I think it starts with kindness to self, and the ability and going beyond your own ego, and being able to say, I can reflect and be honest with myself, and if I have made a mistake, genuinely say, yes, I've made a mistake, I'm going to do things better. And once you are kind to yourself, I think you can start having that mindset of, it's okay, right? No one's cruel, no one's going to judge you, and that mindset side of things will come. Whatever difficulties or obstacles that you go through in life, there is always a lesson to come out of it. So you look for that brightness rather than look for that distraction. And I think it's really important in life, growing up as an adult, and I say I'm still growing, I'm still learning, to be able to acknowledge that that's exactly what you're still doing. You could still, I'm at 44 and I'm still learning, and being okay with the fact that I don't know it all. And I and letting your kids know that sometimes you're still learning with them. And where does that mindset come from? I think it comes from a lot of training, a lot of reflecting back to self, and say, you can choose to dwell in the sadness and not learn from it, or you can choose to say, what did I learn from this and how do I change from there? And I think it comes from that feedback that you give to yourself and that honesty that you give to yourself and allowing yourself to be honest to yourself. And I think a friend of mine wrote a book a few years ago, and it was about, and I don't remember the title, but specifically it was more about and how as human being, not just as parents, but as human being, we need to, quash our own ego, because quite often it's our ego that gets in the way of that self-reflection. It's our ego that gets in the way of self-correcting. And and I think it's so important that we just say to ourselves, actually, you know what, I screwed up there. That's okay.
Yeah.
Let's get on with it. Let's figure it out and let's move it forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're never
Yeah,
going
I
to be
think-
that perfect parent, I think. And your children shouldn't expect you to be that perfect have it all together parent. And I think it's really important that we're talking about it right now, because I still can visualize myself as a 10-year-old. I remember there was a time when I looked at the world and I thought that all of the world's problem has been solved because my parents had it so together. They never showed any cracks, and I genuinely had a concern in my life growing up, and I thought, well, what problem am I going to solve when I'm an adult? Because the last few generations have solved it all. And I think, and I made sure that I wasn't that parent, because I don't come across as having it all together, but I do come across it as I do say, let's figure it out together. If we come to something that we can't, we don't have an answer for straight away.
Yeah. I think it's a journey, right? And we're also learning. And I think I love the fact that you said that you're still learning, you're still growing, you're still in that phase. You don't have it all figured out. But what throughout our conversation, the thread that was common was you've been true to your values. You had certain values, whether they were installed in you through your nurturing as a child, or whether this was something innate in you. You've been true to them, and I think you've cared very little about what other people think. Your life was different, and everybody's life is different, but sometimes when we look at the social media or we look at other people, we want to be that. So we stop respecting the differences and the uniqueness that we have in our lives, and we want to be something else or someone else. I think 10 years ago that was not a problem, but nowadays I don't think anybody is safe from that feeling, because we are all so exposed to everybody's life. So I think it's a challenge, but we're also learning and we are navigating this new world. So on a lighter note, before we end, I think I wanted to know this from you. So what is it about Malaysian parenting that you really like, and maybe one thing that you don't like? And what is it about Australian parenting that you like and you don't like, maybe through your observation, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I was actually talking to a friend about a year ago now, and he's a teacher in a high school. And I was talking to him about my journey coming from, obviously going from Malaysia to Australia when I was 15, where the friendship groups have been formed. So I had a really hard time growing up as a 15-year-old in Australia. And I felt that I had to do a lot of self-discovery, from 15. Now, what he said to me was, he said, he teaches at a school, so he's Aussie, and he teaches at a school that has a lot of Asians in it, from all across the Asia, South Asia, East Asia, and so forth. And he said, from his observation as an Aussie, he said, what I love about the Asians is how much the parents have expectations on their children, because Aussie kids, they could just do whatever, genuinely do whatever, and no one cares. Right. Wow. And I'm sure there will be those that do care, but what his observations in an eastern suburb, it's a lovely suburb, it's a government school system. And he said to me, the expectations that these parents have on their children, I think that's really important. And I think that will never be taken away from me, because while I want to encourage my children to have their own path, to have their own positive attitude and positive and strong character, I also expect them to be successful. And I think having that expectation on your children comes from that Asian mum in me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I would say. You know, what's positive coming out of my Malaysian influence is that it is okay to have expectation on your children. And you know what? The thing is, children need their parents to have expectations on them as well. Because imagine going through life trying to figure out what your goal in life is, because you're an 18-year-old. You don't know what you're going to be as a 22-year-old, as a 30-year-old. You're still figuring it out. But as a minimum, wanting to make your mum and dad proud, I think that is will be what helps them navigate through life, having that expectations. So yeah, so I would say,
and I think it's everywhere in life, right? Even in a
yeah,
corporation, even in the corporate, if nobody has any expectation from the younger people who join in, like what direction will they get, or what kind of
yeah,
inspiration will they get, right? So it's true in every walk of life that we all need a mentor.
a
And for our
compass.
children in a company, yeah, exactly. And for our children, we are exactly that, right? We don't have all the answers, but we know some things that work. And maybe sort of through constant dialogue, maybe interaction, you can build a certain, help them, maybe co-work with them to build some kind of goals. So there's nothing really wrong. I mean, this is another thing I feel, that all these terms like helicopter parent or this parent or that parent, we start throwing about these terms very callously and we don't really think. I am actually particularly not fond of labels, so I wouldn't call anybody anything, because I think we all have a capacity to change, and we all maybe are acting in a certain way because of stress or because of our own upbringing. So beyond the label, I think looking beyond the label is also very important.
Absolutely. And not allowing a preset list of criteria to define you. And it's important that you feel comfortable enough as an adult. You feel comfortable enough to say, I don't have it all together, but I have a good compass, and you have a good sense of where things should be, and being genuinely and honest with that part, at least as a minimum. Yeah.
Absolutely. So as we come to wrap this up, I think I really hope that people who are listening to you, especially mothers who are looking to maybe restart their careers, or they're feeling lost in their careers and are not able to juggle their role as a parent, as a single parent, as a parent with a partner. I think there are so many things that you can guide people all on about. It'd be wonderful if you can share a little bit about where people can connect with you, maybe some social handles, or they can follow your work. It'll be great to stay connected that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, there will be, I am actually going to start my own sort of profile website where I talk about education as
Wow.
well as parenting. So it's something
Lovely.
that's kind of been in the back of my mind for a little while,
Yeah.
because I feel that it's important for us to actually talk about it. Because like I said at the very beginning, there is no manual for this, right? There is only a community where you can exchange ideas, and I think it's important that we build ourselves the community of people that you want to be like, or you want to be with, and just being a positive influence for each other. Yeah, so I think that's so let's keep in touch, and there will be more to come.
Absolutely. I think that's the whole idea with which I started the Parent Academy, to create a space where people can connect with each other and not feel alone in this journey. So while my primary focus is, the geography of India, I'm sure that when you connect with your parents, you'll bring in so much more in terms of your experience. You have, two grown-up kids. There's so much more that you can share, even with the teenagers, right? So there are a lot of parents with teenage issues. So you've been through that. You're still in that process. So I think you'll be a wonderful resource, and I wish you all the very best with your work in your professional space in with Manga High, and also in your new venture. So yeah, All
Thank
the very
you.
best.
No,
And
thank you.
Thank you for being here with us.
And yeah, no, thank you. And I love the work that you're doing in terms of influencing your parents as well. And I think it's always nice to see that it's, you don't have to feel alone in this parenting journey. So
Yeah.
there is always people that you can turn to.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Ritika. Bye.